Imagine you packed your kids in the car and took them to the movie theater for the latest Pixar movie, and instead they showed you Showgirls. That would be a little bit of a bait and switch, and maybe not what you were expecting to see, or for your kids to see. And that's kind of what they're doing with the marketing of a new movie coming out this November called Knives Out. Hey, everybody, I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott On, and this is Right Angle, brought to you by the members of BillWhittle.com. Gentlemen, I saw the trailer for this last summer in front of a really lousy movie I won't even bore you with, and Knives Out just looked like a darkly comic, fun, hip take on the old Agatha Christie murder mystery where you've got a dozen suspects in this rich family. The patriarch's been murdered, and everybody's eccentric and weird, and the detective is even more eccentric and weird and delves through everybody's crazy background stories until they finally figure out who done it in the end. But it turns out, in fact, the movie is a scathing indictment of Trump voters and white supremacy and all the rest. They showed this thing at the Toronto International Film Festival over the weekend, and let me read you from some of these critic reviews that got posted on Twitter, courtesy of my new friends at SocietyReviews.com. Tom Ray Laughley, who's got bylines just about everywhere for movie reviews, says Knives Out is a fun FU to rich white Trump voters, wrapped in a crafty Agatha Christie package, very pro-immigration, and none of this is subtle. Enjoy it in a crowd, she says. Matt Goldberg says Knives Out is a total delight from start to finish. It's also a scathing indictment. You never want to see a movie where it says it's a scathing indictment. You just don't. Of American greed in the Trump era. Now, American greed in the Obama era was fine because Lightbringer. And he says, I'll have more on that when the movie opens in November, except by then, I hope to have forgotten all about it. Bill, let's start with you. Would it surprise you to learn that Knives Out is directed by the same guy, Rian Johnson, who ruined Star Wars with The Last Jedi?
Well, when you were telling me about the plot of Knives Out, a scathing indictment of Donald Trump and capitalism and all that stuff, I thought you were talking about The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can make a pretty compelling case for him being the most hated man in America. He's in my top five.
Yeah.
I was an editor forever. Started out writing and directing movies and ended up as an editor because that's where the regular factory work was here in this town. And when you become an editor, when you learn the power of the edit, you can realize just how amazing your perspective can change based on stuff that already exists. The classic example is Eisenstein. The Russians, as the Russian Soviet film programs were getting started, they didn't have enough money for film, so they used to recut stock footage from just bizarre kind of stuff and see if they could get a different meaning. But the classic example is he would show people's expression, then he'd show a plate of steak, and then he'd show people's expression again and say, what is the guy thinking? He's hungry. Then they'd show a beautiful woman. What's he thinking? He's lustful. It was the same shot. The shot never changed. It was the relationship of the shots. To understand the bait and switch aspect of it, I cannot recommend this highly enough. When you're finished watching this, and then after you go and subscribe to BillWhittle.com, go onto YouTube and look for something called The Shining Recut. It's the movie The Shining cut as a romantic comedy, the trailer for it. And I swear to God, it looks like the warmest family movie ever made. The Shining. It's just unbelievable. And as I was looking it up, I realized now there's a Willy Wonka horror cut.
There's a Mary Poppins horror cut too.
And then Elf is recut as a trailer. As a thriller. So yes, you are getting the bait and switch. And yes, it is not only dishonest, it's outright lying and fraud. And I don't know whether they're doing it because they know that this movie's going to tank, or whether they're doing it because they want to lure some Trump supporters into it so they can finally show them what an awful, horrible guy he is. But let's not forget, folks, the director of this movie is the guy who killed off Luke Skywalker for nothing, and Admiral Akbar for nothing, and invalidated the entire idea of hyperspace for nothing. He's a low-level hack, and he is radically left-wing enough to have gotten that job from Kathleen Kennedy, who's also radically left-wing, and the two of them together destroyed Star Wars. And people say, how could it be possible? It's such a valuable franchise. It's not a loss for them. Either they make social justice movies and people go and see them and they become woke, or, and that has never happened, by the way, or they make a social justice movie, people don't go to see it. And then in the case of Star Wars, well, at least we managed to destroy this entire idea about a young white male who starts out in the middle of nowhere and then through individuality and courage and hard work goes on to take on the vast mechanisms of the state. At least we destroyed that aspect of it, so it wasn't a complete loss.
Yeah, it's just to take something you could never ever hope to duplicate or do anything that great yourself and to tear it down instead just to prove that you can is just the worst absolute kind of nihilism. Because you're not just destroying a franchise, you're actually damaging some of the culture that makes America not just great,
absolutely,
but fun. This
is absolutely right.
This is the funnest country in the world, and they've absolutely got to tear that down. Scott, if they did this kind of bait and switch to you, and I know you've told us before that your standards for movie are fairly low. You just want to be able to sit in the theater and hold your wife's hand, which is just one of the sweetest things ever. But if they were to pull this kind of bait and switch with you, even if it's not Knives Out, if it's some other movie where suddenly you find out that instead of some light entertainment, the screenwriter and the director and the actors are calling you some horrible names, are you going to sit there for a couple hours, or do you think you're going to leave the theater?
It's fascinating because the criticism of people on the right is that they haven't been able to find a way to communicate beyond PowerPoint presentations. And these are the 3 points that I want to convey to you today, and then we'll end with a patriotic poem and God bless America. And it seems like more and more the left, instead of playing to its strength, is migrating toward that approach of didactic entertainment, where it is so direct that they just violate that ability to suspend disbelief. I mean, the key to making a movie is that you bring people into a world that's believable and that they get caught up in it. And when they walk out of there, they've felt something. They've experienced something, an emotion. They haven't been taking notes. They haven't been aware of whatever your political agenda is. They were caught up in the story. And so when I get to some of these movies where it's just obvious, or TV shows more frequently, where it's just really obvious that they're trying to drive home this message that is, a political dissertation, it just completely screws up their whole purpose. It not only fails with me, it fails as a movie because it makes for just lousy entertainment. Even the people on the left are less entertained and less engaged by things like that because, frankly, even most of the people who vote Democrat don't go to political events, and they don't read a lot of political news, and they don't watch political discussions. They just live their lives, and when you try to beat people over the head with it, you're really destroying your opportunity to persuade somebody. And the way to persuade somebody is to really tell stories where the characters that have the attributes that you favor are likable. And you're rooting for them, and you want them to win, or you want to be able to laugh along with them rather than at them. But when a movie becomes an attack tool for a party, you walk out of there with a sense of, wow, I'll bet all these famous left-wing Hollywood actors did this one for free. Then you've failed as a movie maker.
Indeed. It's all about telling great stories in maybe the greatest storytelling format ever devised. And when you lose that, you've really, really lost the thread. I want to read just a couple more of these really brief Twitter reviews before I wrap things up. Brian Tallarico says, one of the many things I love about Knives Out, it takes direct, all caps, direct aim at the MAGA crowd. And David Ehrlich said, Knives Out is a diabolical, hilarious, and massively entertaining whodunit that updates the musty genre for the modern world and all of its MAGA a-holes, except, of course, he spelled that one out because this is Twitter, where we are all encouraged to be the worst possible versions of ourselves that we could be. Folks, this is supposed to be a scathing indictment of Trump voters. The dead body is played by Christopher Plummer, who is an 85-year-old extremely wealthy writer of fiction. Just like your typical Trump voter, right? Oh wait, not quite. And it's this privileged elite family with the giant mansion on the huge estate that are all secret Trump voters? No, none of this sounds right. Listen, Donald Trump was put into office by about 140,000 blue collar Democrats in the Rust Belt who switched their allegiance from Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012 to Donald Trump in 2016 because they felt like they just spent the last 8 years getting alternately neglected and belittled by their so-called betters on the left in New York and in Hollywood. And let me tell you, if Hollywood wants to get more Trump, keep making movies like Knives Out, keep neglecting and insulting the people who put them in office and telling them what horrible people they are. Because I got to tell you, if they were maybe iffy on Trump in 2016, you keep telling them stuff like that, and they're going to be huge on him in 2020. And that is your right angle on that. Brought to you by the members, the paying members of BillWhittle.com. Remember, content like this needs sponsors like you, so please click on over to BillWhittle.com, become a member. We would love to have you on board. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.